this area. He's become really involved in lots of historical things, and he's one of the few people, if I tease him a bit, that I can say I always look up to, because on a good day I might reach his shoulders. But Peter and I have had a couple of lovely lunches together talking about the Hereford Gospels, and Peter's particular interest are the Anglo Saxon additions at the end of the book. And he's working hard on those, and is going to speak to us about the trial of the widow, Anglo Saxon law in the Hereford Gospels.
Thank you very much, Bishop David. That's they don't make diamonds the size of pumpkins, you know. This is subtitled "The Largely Untold History of the Legal Additions to the Hereford Gospels and the People They Record." And I say largely untold because it has received nowhere near the amount of interest that it should. Let me see. This is a picture that the lady who runs the Wellington History Society put together for me from reading the legal addendums. And I used it about 3 or 4 times before I noticed that the bloke on the right-hand side is wearing a trilby. But there you go. Not everything is perfect, is it? Let's begin. At the rear of the Hereford Gospels are 2 compelling documents in vernacular English, both relating to the transfer or retention of land and involving a powerful 11th century Welsh borders family. One of these documents may be referred to as a court record, as it relates a trial held at a shire moot or court in Herefordshire. Although due to the record's nature, it has also been described as a will, a legal text, and as a miscellaneous charter. There is also a second, shorter document, also recorded at a shire moot or court, which is the record of a land purchase within the same family. I've had the pleasure of examining, measuring and photographing these documents in the Gospels, and I would just like to thank the Hereford Cathedral Library for that wonderful opportunity. And here they are. These documents are such a treasure trove, containing nationally important historical information about not only Herefordshire, but English and Welsh pre-conquest figures. It is impossible to fit all the strands of inquiry into a presentation, so here I will limit myself to just a choice few. The qualities of the documents, the scribe that wrote them, one of the characters that is in it, Leoflaith, and the main character in it, the unnamed widow. I'll read through the documents and then pray see them. Here it is written that a shire court sat at Aylnoth Stone in the reign of King Canute. There was Bishop Athelstan and Rannig the alderman, Edwin the alderman's son, Leofwin, Wulfsige's son, Thurkill the White, and Tofi the Proud, who came there on the king's errand. And there were Brinning the sheriff, and Aelweard of Frome, and Leofwin of Frome, and Godric of Stoke, and all the thanes or knights in Herefordshire. Then came journeying to the court Edwin, Enion's son, and he made a claim against his mother to a certain parcel of land, which was at Wellington and Cradley. The bishop asked who would answer for Edwin's mother. Thurkill the White answered and said he would if he knew about the claim. As the claim was not known to him, 3 thanes were chosen from the court to ride to where the mother was, and that was at Fawley. These 3 were Leofwin of Frome, Aelsieg the Red, and Winsieg the Boatman. And when they came to her, they asked what claim she had to the lands for which her son was suing her. Then she said that she had no land which in any way belonged to him. And she became very bitterly angry with her son, and called Leoflaith, Thurkill's wife, and her relative to her, and before the 3 said, the 3 thanes, said, "Here sits Leoflaith, my kinswoman, to whom I give not only my land, but also my gold and garments and robes and all that I own after my day." She then said to the thanes, "Act like thanes, and relate my message to the court before all the good men, and make known to them to whom I have given my land and all my property, and to my own son never anything, and bid them all to be witness of this. And then they rode to the moot and made known to all the good men what she had placed upon them. Then Thurkill the White stood up in the moot and prayed all the thanes to grant to his wife the lands which her kinswoman had given her. And they did so. And then Thurkill rode to the minster of St. Ethelbert with the leave and witness of all the people, and caused it to be placed in a Christ's book, which we see before us at the moment. And the land transaction is considerably shorter. Here is made known in writing that Leofwin, the brother of Leoflaith, has bought half a hide of land at Mallows Hill from Edric, his kinsman, the son of Ufit, for half a mark of gold, and 1 pound of silver, and 2 auras, to be ever in the possession of his family, for giving and for granting to that one who may be ever dearest to him. On the witnesses of Earl Swain, Bishop Athelstan, Thurkill the White, Ulfkettle the Reeve, and all the thanes in Herefordshire, and the 2 communities at St. Ethelbert's Minster and St. Guthlax. So in the trial, Edwin comes from afar, takes his mother to court, and demands that Wellington and Cradley are returned to him. Thurkill says he knows nothing about this, probably a lie, although some of the language that is used could indicate that there was a long story to this, and he didn't know it all, or wasn't there for it all. So 3 knights are sent to get Mum's testimony. She tells them that her boy is getting nothing, and orders them to take this message to the court, and also that she is leaving everything, which includes Wellington, to her relative, Leoflaith, who also happens to be Thurkill the White's wife. Thurkill then asks to be excused from the court, rides to the minster to have this written into the gospel book. It may be helpful to look at some of the major occurrences during the time that these documents were written in order to give us some context. So here we have the year 1000, Iceland's parliament passes a resolution, all people on the island should be baptized as Christians, so we have Christianity moving through. Leif Erikson reaches America. 1002, St. Brice's Day Massacre. Elfgifu, or Emma, arrives in England from Normandy. Kent attacked by the Danes and Canterbury occupied. 1013, Sweyn Forkbeard becomes king. 1014, Sweyn dies, Ethelred returns. Ethelred dies, Canute and Edmund Ironside are at war. Peace after partition. And 1035, Canute dies. So the document we're looking at mainly exists in between 1016 and 1035 to give it some parameters. Definitely a time when there was a lot going on and a lot of difficulty for many people. So talking about the document qualities, there are many unique features to the legal editions, which again emphasizes their importance to the study of the area and the time period. As a will, the document is unique in its failure to identify the testatrix or the woman who is bequeathing the land and goods. Roughly 25% of all the wills that exist from the late Anglo Saxon period are made by women, but this is the only one where the woman is not named. Personally, I believe because this dispute was so well known that she didn't have to be. The example of thanes being dispatched to take the plea of a defendant or evidence of a defendant is unique in our understanding of the legal process. The trial document is clearly, and by its own internal logic, dictated by Thurkill, of Danish heritage, holding the rank of thane. This is not a feature we find elsewhere. The second document contains the first reference to St. Ethelbert's and St. Guthlax acting in concert, and the first mention of St. Guthlax at a shire moot or court, indicating the relationship of the two possibly entering a different phase between the recording of the trial and the recording of the land transfer. Both the trial record and the land transfer are records of events which took place at a shire moot, but are a decade, if not several decades apart. The link between the two documents is the family to which they refer, the family of Thurkill, and to a greater extent, Leoflaith, indicating a relationship between the family and the cathedral that was mutually beneficial and was worth maintaining over several years, even over generations, As the Gospels are not filled with judgments from the Shire Moot concerning other local families, it must be realised that this family had some measure of special access and some need to have these decisions or ratifications recorded. It is possible that as Thurkill may have been a newcomer in an area that had relatively fewer Danes than elsewhere, they felt it was necessary to safeguard their transactions by recording them. It has been put forward that the writing of land transactions in Gospels is a bulwark against disappropriation, and certainly an analysis of the witnesses recorded in the trial record reveal an almost equal weighting of Danish and or Scandinavian heritage names and English ones. This must have been a deliberate act to disproportionately favour a smaller Danish population. Another unique feature that supports the blending of the Danish and the Anglo Saxon is the recording of the units of purchase in the land transaction in both Scandinavian units and in English. This is especially significant as the transaction was solely within an English family, a feature that is not found elsewhere. Moving on to the scribe, what can we know about the scribe? Both the documents are written by the same hand, but were entered many years apart, at least a decade and more likely several decades apart. This span of time is revealed by the witness lists with datable figures such as Rannig and Swain, giving minimum and maximum dates of 1015 and 1042 for the two documents. The scribe is impressive and accomplished, being able to write freehand without setting out and with no discernible errors or amendments in the scripts. There is a discernible deterioration in the pen strokes and the formation of the letters between the two documents. The later document, with its more bullish and confident appearance, evidenced by the arrow-straight, unprepared lines on the land transfer, can be seen to contrast with the less confident opening third of the trial record, as evidenced by the indistinct right margin, poor word spacing anticipation, leading to overhangs and wavering height on the terminal section of the 7th and 8th lines. As we can show a bare minimum of 8 years between the documents, it is possible to conjecture that the scribe had a lengthy career, and that the improvements between the two scripts came from practice through repetition. I like to think of our scribe as having a long, peaceful, and happy life in his scriptorium. The scribe is clearly more at home in a later entry than he is in the trial record, where he appears to be struggling to reconcile the dictated words of Thurkill with the requirements of the structure of a legal document. A scaffolding of legal phrases appear throughout the trial record that can be found in other legal documents. Yesum yerit, or here is written, etc., is a common opening found across charters and is in fact repeated in both the Gospel editions. Thurkill's request that the land in question be assured to his wife's ownership is recorded with the phrase, "the land's clean," meaning without further claims. We find this phrase used, for example, in the Athelstan court case, where the Bishop of Hereford was accused of cheating on a land deal, a record of which was also probably written at Hereford, and possibly by the same scribe. And after my day, or after my day, which is the bottom entry on the screen that you're looking at now, is a commonly used formula in wills, indicating that the transfer of property was not immediate and was in fact conditional on death. This is in fact so commonly used that only 2 of the female wills that we have from the period do not have this clause. In the land transaction, we also have the phrase, "to be ever in the possession of his family for giving and for granting to that one who may be ever dearest to him." A reduced version of this can be found, for example, in the wills of Britric and Archbishop Aelfric in the form of "to remain in the family." The cathedral was very good to me, letting me colour in the Gospel at this point. You see the top entry there is "after my day," and the bottom one is "the land's clean." Several other examples exist which result in the conclusion that the scribe was more than familiar with the formulation of legal documents. The documents, when taken together with the other two documents, which may be said to have been produced at Hereford, the boundaries of the bishopric of Hereford on the right and the Athelstan dispute at the top left, reveal that there were several different scribes at Hereford during the period. We can see that there are at least 3 scribes producing high-quality manuscripts at the cathedral at that time. If we combine that with an examination of the internal logic of the trial record, Thurkill is excused from the court while it is still sitting, pardon me, and rides to the cathedral to have the record placed in a gospel book. These courts, or moots as they were called, were important events. The bishop would have gone there with a large retinue of priests, scribes, servants, etc. And yet Thurkill was still able to find a very accomplished scribe to write in the gospel what he wanted to record. And this scribe took him at his word, recording the judgment that he had not been party to or witnessed, indicating that Thurkill had a relationship with the cathedral and or the scribe that gave him access to the holiest of books, also indicating the presence of other high-status sacred works, as the bishop would have taken others with him. The structure of the trial record reveals a more Scandinavian than Anglo Saxon structure. The narrative deviates from the accepted structure of charters, which is notification, disposition, witness list, sanction, by locating the occurrence in both time and space, stating that it took place at Aylnoth Stone in the time of Canute. This is more reminiscent of the structure of an Icelandic saga than the structure of an Anglo-Saxon legal document. The narrator of a saga may use the continued existence of a physical object in order to authenticate a story, as Thurkill uses Aylnoth Stone here, or as is used in the saga of the people of Eri, in relation to the existence of Thor's stone, where human sacrifice took place. The sagas tell stories that fall into a rather schematized pattern, where the characters are introduced in their geographical and historical setting. There is conflict, possibly over a small matter within a family or a close relationship, and the feud is an ever-present motif. It is notable that the second land transfer document adheres, though not well, more closely to the standard charter structure of notification, disposition, witness list, sanction, although obviously the absence of a sanction is a glaring omission. There is no curse or warning that anyone who tries to subvert what is in this document will suffer God's wrath, excommunication or the like. I put forward the theory that as Thurkill was a Viking, the scribe felt compelled not to put in a religious protection for the contents of the record, as Thurkill was a pagan. There is even some evidence that Thurkill had a foreign accent, and that the scribe may have had some difficulty understanding him as he recited the events that had happened at the court. Despite being clearly experienced in writing legal documents, as discussed, we find many elements of legal phrases being used in the trial record. It is as if he was trying to shoehorn an account from a non-legally trained person into a legal document. The scribe changes the spelling of Viking names several times within the trial record, and phonological considerations would require an individualistic response by the scribe to unfamiliar accented names, which could not rely on the received strictures of any exemplars, but on the receipt of the phonetic characteristics filtered through dialect and speech patterns. What that word salad means is that he spelled the names the way he heard them. For instance, if you had no knowledge of Welsh and someone said Llanelli to you, you would be forgiven for spelling it Thlanethi, because that's how it sounds. He spells English names the same way as they are spelled in other documents, because he knew them. But the Viking names he uses change from line to line. And here you can see a representation of how pronunciation is reflected in spelling. If you take my name, Peter, it would be as if it was said, written Peter, Puter, Peter. And in essence, it sounds like he is writing Danish Viking names down for the first time and is struggling with how they sound. The different spellings will produce different sounds: Thurkill, Thorkill, Thirkel, Thurkel. An indication of the scribe's wider reading may be found in the choice of the phrase abeodath min erend, or announce my errand or message. Perhaps the most significant example of the phrase abeodath min erend being used to signify speech from a superior to an inferior is its use in the poem, oh, pardon me, oops, ignore that, is its use in the poem Guthlac A, which contains the line Abeodeth him God's errand, announced to them God's message. The greater significance of this is in the context of the line within the verses of Guthlac A. And that is, then the angels speak, keeping the elder order. One spirit greets the other, announce to them God's message. Guthlac A and B are two poems in Old English found in the 10th century Exeter book. There are only two instances where the word Abeodeth is recorded, once in Guthlac A and once in this Herefordshire Gospel trial document. The opening verses which contain the phrase deal with a female at the end of her life and her transition to heaven at her death, her receiving an announcement from God through an angel. As the scribe was at St. Ethelbert's Minster, which later becomes St. Ethelbert's and St. Guthlac's in the second Hereford Gospels document, it is possible that the scribe was familiar with the verses and described a form of words known to him which seemed appropriate for a dying female. The Exeter book was donated in 1072, and the location of the composition of Guthlac A has been explored. Certainly there is opinion that Guthlac A is a firmly Mercian composition, and that despite the single copy that exists today, the transmission of Guthlac, both within the life and in the poems, was widespread across Mercia. The association of Guthlac and Mercia is central to the life of Guthlac, and the cult of St. Guthlac was widespread throughout Europe until the 1300s. The circulation parameters of the life of Guthlac is unknown, but is assumed to be widespread, as copies are now in several cities across Europe. The Hereford scribe who chose to use the phrase Abeodeth min erend may well have been aware of the imagery in Guthlac A, and chose these words to mimic the departing soul of someone he knew personally. The two entries relating to the family of Thurkill and Leoflaith suggest, as we have discussed, a relationship between them and the scribe, and his use of the phrase a way of honouring his the soon-to-be departed widow. Moving on to Leoflaith, another character. The second document also mentions Leoflaith and is recording a land purchase where her brother is buying land, and Leoflaith appears to be the guarantor for her brother. It is extremely unusual for a man to be named in relation to a female, and gives an indication of how powerful Leoflaith may have been, and how much weight her name seemed to carry. She effectively acts as a guarantor for the transaction. The first line of the transaction reads, "Here is made known in writing that Leofwin, the brother of Leoflaith, has bought half a hide of land at Mallows Hill." Just for a moment, let's look at the second document here and just take out the words brother of Leoflaith. And that's the one on your screen now. I apologise for my poor PowerPoint skills. Here is made known in writing that Leofwin has bought half a hide of land at Mallows Hill from Edric, his kinsman. Removing what does the document lose if we remove Leoflaith? The document loses nothing for her absence. Leofwin buys his land from Edric, a kinsman. Edric is the son of Uffic, so the transaction remains within one family. The Earl and the Bishop are there, along with all the Thanes of Herefordshire. So why do we need this woman to be included? Because she mattered, because she was important. And this is a list of some, but probably not all, of the holdings that are attributable to Leoflaith and Thurkill. And we see many names which are very common to us now: Bartus Tree, Knighton, Maund, common Herefordshire locations, Creedon Hill, Fownhope. Fownhope, one of the few places that actually increases in value before and after from before to after the Norman conquest. Leoflaith's status as the wife of Thurkill is not mentioned in the second document. This may be because her status is well known and the transaction takes place within her family group. The transaction is for a sizable parcel of land, and there is no indication that the purchaser, her brother Leofwin, is unable to complete the transaction by youth or infirmity. The vendor is named as Edric, son of Uffic, and as a kinsman of Leofwin, and by extension, a kinsman of Leoflaith also. Leofwin's lack of patriarchal or locational cognomen must indicate that both his and Leoflaith's parents are dead, and that Leoflaith has now taken on the responsibility as the head of a family unit, and is recognised both socially and legally as such. The table above shows the table on the screen, shows the passage of the land attributed to Leoflaith from her to Hugh the Ass, post-conquest. One of the holdings, Maund, is shown as being jointly owned by St Guthlax, while Creedon Hill was shown as held by Thurkill jointly with St Peter's of Hereford. These associations through the ownership of land between Leoflaith, Thurkill and the Cathedral of Hereford further reinforce the importance of Leoflaith's family within the area, and the almost wholesale defenestration of Leoflaith's property to a single individual, Hugh the Ass, may indicate that she was seen as a single legal landholding entity in her own right. The table shows that her land holdings were not only large and relatively wealthy, but were located across 600s, a unit of measurement of the county, from the far north of the county, including into Wales, the east, and with several holdings around Hereford and the Golden Valley. The geographically disparate, the map just shows you in red Leoflaith's holdings, in blue Thurkill's holdings. The geographically disparate nature of the spread of possessions may indicate that these were gifted or received by bequests from relations. It certainly indicates that she would have had influence over and knowledge of every part of the county and would have been well known to the thainly class that were present at the moot. The land transfer witness list, more conventionally located at the end of the land transfer, would suggest that this transaction was ratified at a shire moot and that Leoflaith's inclusion in this transaction was considered regular and acceptable by not only ecclesiastical and secular authorities, but also by all the thanes of Herefordshire. All of the other people in the documents are named in relation to their rank, their fathers, their hometown, an occupation of some kind, or as a representation of some idiosyncratic feature. Tofig the Proud, Ailsig the Red. Only Leoflaith is named without any secondary identifier, and only Leofwin is named in relation to a woman. Due to the paucity of references where the male is described in relation to the female, we must accept that in these cases certain special circumstances apply. These special circumstances may apply to either of the parties. The male may be young, have no agency, while the female be especially powerful in her own right. Economically, as appears to be the case with Leoflaith, or through rank, which may be the case with the widow. This goes to the heart of why this 1,000-year-old text has been described as of no historical value, and the accompanying trial record have been mainly ignored. Years ago, women's history was not considered interesting, and now it is, but only the bits that show women as being oppressed, which is a shame because there are some really interesting, influential women, and several of them are to be found around here. One of the few references to a male defined by his relationship to a female is also in relation to a woman called Leoflaith. Algar, son of Leoflaith, is mentioned in the Fratre Calendarum of Exeter. Although the two Leoflaiths cannot be definitively said to be one and the same, the references to Algar, son of Leoflaith, and his son Jordan would give Algar a birth date of the early to mid-11th century, and his attestation of charters indicates the status of a modest but respected Exeter worthy. A search of Pays reveals relatively few, that's the prosopography of Anglo Saxon England, Pays, reveals relatively few instances of females named Leoflaith in the correct time frame and approximate location of the west or southwest of England. It is possible that the dispossession of Leoflaith and Thurkill in 1066 led to the relocation of their now reduced family, with Leoflaith retaining some of her reputation. The question of whether this Leoflaith is one and the same with the Herefordshire Leoflaith is ultimately moot. What is clear is that the mother or widow aligns herself with a powerful figure in the form of Leoflaith to assist her in the retention of her property. And the unnamed widow now, as we can see, the mother had the power to dispose of her property in whichever way she decided. She can and does disenfranchise her son, not only of her land, including Wellington, but also of her jewels, raiments, or garments, and all of her personal possessions. In doing this, she is in fact making a will, as discussed previously. The challenge to her ownership was brought in the Shire Court and therefore would need to have been brought in the lower or Hundreds Court before being appealed to the Shire. To challenge one another through the courts like this was not something that was open to everyone. You would need to have status in order to do this. Although women could and did speak in court, the widow has the luxury of having Thurkill speak for her. He denies any knowledge of the matter, which may be a barefaced lie or represent his being ignorant of the previous, possibly lengthy, and I would suggest certainly acrimonious, battle over this land. It may also indicate that he wished to distance himself from a feud with Edwin. But what was it that the mother and son were actually fighting over? How wealthy was the unnamed mother? This is the Domesday Book entry for Wellington. As you can see, it was well worth fighting for, but unfortunately at that time did not have the excellent garden centre that it has now. A reeve is a smith, 4 riding men and 2 mills make it a very prosperous place indeed. Of the 2 areas in dispute, Wellington and Cradley, only Wellington can be positively identified and is the 3rd most valuable tract of land that is owned by Leoflaith and Thurkill, as is described in the Domesday Book. The settlement had 44 households in total and was one of the top 20% most valuable settlements recorded in the Domesday Book. If a standard measure of 120 acres per hide is taken, then the land covered an area of 600 acres. The land around Wellington is flat and fertile with a river running through it and was on one of the salt paths from Droitwich to Gloucester, which will have given Wellington the opportunity to take advantage of trade. If the value of the half hide recorded in the land transaction is taken and multiplied, then Wellington alone would be worth 5 marks of gold, £5 of silver, and 10 auras, a Danish value equal to about 160 pence. It's indicative that both English and Danish units are used here, as we discussed. This is an enormous amount of static wealth producing an income. The document states that this case was brought by Edwin, Enion's son. You can see that just here. There is no other name spelt in this way in the corpus of Old English that we have. This is unique. Several scholars have looked at this and decided that the name is a corruption of a Welsh personal name, Enion. The line of Hywel Dda was seen to hold land in the area, and 3 generations later we have his great-grandson, Enion, who had a child called Edwin, son of Enion. The name Edwin had been used by the Welsh royal families since the 9th centuries at least, and it was common. But there is only one family, the ruling family of de Hoybeth, who have Edwin ap Enion as father and son. It is easy to form the view that women in Anglo Saxon England were a poor, downtrodden lot. It's a popular view and a fashionable view, but not the view of all historians. Certainly there were many women who were able to direct and influence their own destinies where rank can trump gender, and I believe that our unnamed widow was one of them. And the land was not all that she was leaving. This is from the trial document. Here sits Leoflace, my kinswoman. I give her all that is mine, my gold, my clothes, my garments, and all that I have after I have died. Tell the thanes, act like thanes, and announce my errand to the moot and before all the good men. Tell them to who I have given all my lands and all that I own, and nothing to my son. Let them witness this. I love the part where she scolds them, saying, act like thanes. The actual words is doth thenlich, or act thanely, and then flatters them with all the good men. It has been said that the principal attributes a Welshwoman brought with her to a marriage were her status, beauty, and her reputation. I think we can see the soft diplomacy of cajoling and flattering at work here. It is possible that the decision for the mother to come to England was in order to take advantage of the better protections she had under English law, to take advantage of the income from her estates, and to be with her kinswoman, Leoflace, who could protect her. The family of her son, Edwin ap Ennion, had fallen into a spiral of internecine fighting that had severely reduced the power of the House of de Hoibeth from its high point under Hywel into a mass of warring factions. This internal strife may have prompted the bringing of the suit by Edwin as a means to gain some capital to continue his fight against his family. Anglo Saxon mercenaries do not come cheap, and Edwin was known to employ them for raiding in the Brecons. As he was known for his military capacity and his willingness to raid without warning in furthering any dispute, this would not have been a small matter. The presence of Tolfi the Proud, who was one of Canute's main henchmen and enforcers at the court, and the statement that he was there on the king's errand, outlines how explosive this may have been. I believe that the evidence shows that the unnamed mother of Edwin ap Ennion was, in fact, the Queen of de Hoibeth. Just a little précis of those. Why could she be a queen? Well, she must have had some rank to own the land. She must have had some rank to fight a suit against her. The matter will have already been heard 3 times in the lower court. Her evidence is taken without the requirement for other witnesses. Her son comes from afar, indicating this matter crosses boundaries or borders. She has travelled from afar. She finds an ally in one of the most powerful thanes in the county. She lives in one of the top 20% richest places in the country. And this matter has far more importance than it should have if it were a local difficulty. This matter had, after all, come to the notice of the king. The land in question is within the area that was of interest to Welsh kings, and her son, Edwin ap Ennion, is a very good fit for the de Hoibeth royal line. Within the document, the matter is recorded in a 200-year-old gospel. It was important. Wellington can be interpreted as the place of the line of the Welsh. That's how Wellington is spelled in the document. The form of words for the king is the same as the one used for her. She addresses the moot in the same way that the king addresses his audience in other charters. She uses the correct legal form for will making, so she has experience with this process. The thanes attend her in her home. She commands not just the 3 thanes in front of her, but all the thanes of the county. She's described as Earlic, a uniquely masculine appellation, as in being like an earl. Leoflace, despite her power, is deferential to her. She has wealth, which fits the description of noble goods being the very top layer of disposable goods. All her goods are portable, except the land, obviously. She leaves nothing to anyone else, and one part of the land in question abuts the land given to the line of Owain, which is the same line as Edwin ap Ennion. And finally, if she wasn't very important, no one would have bothered to write down what she said. I'm sorry that this is a whistle-stop tour, and I assure you I've barely scratched the surface of what these documents can offer us. I have attempted to champion these documents and to raise awareness of their special and unique properties by delivering papers at national and international conferences and by giving presentations to local history groups and festivals. I'm not the first one to try to bring these documents to a greater audience, but I hope I can succeed. And I only hope that this may spark others to join me in what can only be further fruitful research. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed that.
Peter, thank you very, very much indeed. That was quite a ride. And I love the way it built up to the climax, that she was the queen. And there's much to think about here. And I think that very final point, how did, why was it written down? And almost without anybody questioning the fact that this was going to be written in the most sacred book which the cathedral possessed, in the absence of the bishop, and it was just done. So something was going on here, which is very, very special. Now, no one's put any questions in the chat as yet.
Just to answer that point that you've got there and flesh that out a little bit, even if this was important enough to be entered into a 200-year-old venerated object,